Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Unique Perspective Show. On today's show, I am thrilled and honored to announce that I have my dear friend JJ Eizik on the show. JJ grew up in Muncie, New York as a normal, healthy child. He went to elementary and to high school in Muncie. In this week's episode, you will hear how JJ overcame his many nisyonis over the years and how he persevered. This week's episode is in memory of my dear friend Rafi Strauss, who was just recently nifter. His name is Rafal Yaakov Yisrael Ben Ron. May his neshama have an aliyah. It is also being sponsored by VentureTech Computer Repair. Whether you have a broken PC, whether it's a desktop or laptop, whether you want to build your own custom computer, or you just need regular IT support, VentureTech Computer Repair is there for you. To learn more about what VentureTech Computer Repair does, please visit us at www.venturetechcomputers.com. That is www.venturetechcomputers.com. Or you can email us at info@venturetechcomputers.com. That is info@venturetechcomputers.com. It is also being sponsored by Paraflight. Whether you need a private plane to fly somewhere, you need an organ flown from one hospital to the next, you have a patient that's very ill that needs to be transferred from one hospital to the next, or you just need transport from somewhere to another place, Paraflight is there for you 24/7. To find out more about Paraflight, please visit them at www.paraflight.aero. That is www.paraflight.aero. Or you can email them at info@paraflight.aero. They are there for you 24/7. Thank you, Paraflight, for sponsoring this week's episode. And now to my conversation with my dear friend JJ Eizik. Welcome to the Unique Perspective Show. How are you?
Okay, thanks for having me on. How are you?
Good. So, JJ, what's going on? First of all, how are you today?
Baruch Hashem, we're doing well.
Yeah,
Everybody's doing their thing. We're just keep on keeping on. That's what we do.
that's good. That's good. Okay, so, first of all, where did you grow up as a little kid when you were born?
I was born in Muncie, New York,
Okay,
and the original part of Muncie. Now Muncie has exploded in many different directions, but I
right.
was born in the original part of Muncie, where my father grew up and where his mother grew up as well. So my family's been
Wow,
in Muncie for at this point over 100 years.
wow,
I'm the fourth generation in Muncie, so we're never leaving, whether we
amazing.
like it or not.
So,
And I had a pretty. It was it is still. It's a beautiful place to grow up.
right.
We had a very nice childhood. It was very country like. We had a lot of land, and I grew up outdoors. I was a very athletic kid. I was a very active kid.
Okay. So growing up, where did you go for yeshivas and stuff?
Shiva, I went to. There was a school when I was growing up. There was a school that had just opened up. It was called Darchei Noam, and it
Okay,
had just started. I had gone to a different. I had gone to Yeshiva Spring Valley before that
okay,
when I started school, and then they had just opened up when I was going into. I think it was third grade, and they had just opened up, and I was going to be part of their first class, the first, you know, level, the first class going through that school,
Okay.
and we decided to. We decided to move for whatever reason. My parents decided to move me to that school, and I
Okay.
finished there. I was in elementary school. I was there through 8th grade.
Okay.
Had a great experience there. And I went to for high school. I went to a place called Yisodi Yisrael, which was a offshoot, a branch of Yisodi Yishurin in Queens.
Okay.
And from there, I actually went to Yisodi Yishurin for 12th grade, and I went to
Okay.
Orachaim in Queens, Rabbi Lander's yeshiva for 3 years in Beis Medrash. And
Okay.
well, we're jumping ahead here because a little during
Right.
that time, we have an interesting story to share with you, but we'll get to
Right.
that.
Okay. So um, growing up, so you obviously left Yeshiva Spring Valley, then you went to this new yeshiva.
Right.
Everything was good in elementary school, meaning like you were feeling good, you were doing everything.
Yeah, it was a regular, normal, regular kid.
Okay.
Did regular things, active, running around, outdoors, like I said, sports,
Right.
everything was normal, regular. And, that was through 8th grade, everything was okay. And I went to high school, 9th grade, everything was fine. 10th grade was doing okay. About halfway through 10th grade is where things started to get a little interesting.
Okay, so you're now in this yeshiva in Muncie for high school, and like you said, you started off good, or 9th and 10th grade, and what were first? Okay, so I don't know if you want to discuss this, but what were your symptoms that you had in the middle of 10th grade that you uh, thought that was an issue?
So I didn't really think it was an issue at the beginning. Actually, we
Okay,
kind of, I might not we, but I kind of ignored it. I kind of didn't really because I was very like I said, I was very into sports. I was very active.
right,
I was always I was falling and jumping, whatever, and I didn't really think much of it. But at the
right,
time, I had started getting this severe, severe pain in my left knee,
okay,
and it was like on and off. It would come and go, so I didn't really pay much attention to it
right.
for the first 2 months, and then a few months in, it started to wake me up at night.
Wow.
Like
Okay.
it would come and go, and then the pain was so bad it would wake me up at night.
Okay.
And so I would, wake up. It would hurt me. I would take some medicine, and eventually the pain would subside, and I would go back to sleep.
Right.
That was another month. It was getting a little weird. I didn't really understand it at the time, obviously, but
Right.
I was trying to ignore it. So I, took the medicine, went to sleep, and everything was fine the next day.
Right.
Then it progressed to during the day. I would have these pain. I don't call them pain attacks, but I wouldn't I would have these real severe pains in my knee, and I even wouldn't be able to sit at my desk. I would have to
Wow.
walk up and down the hallway in yeshiva and go out to the classroom and then I would take the medicine and finally I'd be able to sit back down
Right.
and and then of course the same nights it would wake me up
Right.
at night again. Eventually, when the medicine stopped helping and we
Okay.
just had to wait for the pain to subside,
Right.
I started to get really concerned. I was like, obviously something more is going on here because this is not stopping. And
Right.
it's not just like a sports injury. It's just, it's really must be something. There must be something more to it. I didn't really think of what it
Right.
would be.
Okay.
There must be something more. So we started going to doctors, and a couple of them said, no, he's growing, and they would take X-rays of my knee. They wouldn't see anything, and they would see at
Right.
the edge of the X-ray. They would see my growth plates and which I had no idea what those were, but now I understand a lot of different medical things. But
Right.
they would see my growth plate. They would show me at the end of the X-ray. They would see oh, there's still space. So you're still growing. Maybe it's growing pains, whatever. And I had to take them at their word, as we say. But
Right.
I was in my head, I was yeah, but and my parents were saying also growing pains don't wake you up at night. That's weird.
Right.
So eventually we went to an orthopedic surgeon who was very close with. We were close with him in different ways.
Okay.
My parents knew him, and I knew him a little bit, and I got to know him obviously a lot more.
Right.
I credit him as the man who saved my life because he was the one who actually found what was really wrong.
Wow.
His name was Dr. Rafael Levine. He's an amazing, amazing tzaddik, and
Yeah.
he's an amazing diagnostician, really. So
Okay.
he took X-rays, and he didn't tell us he saw anything, but he basically said he didn't tell us he saw anything on his X-rays, but he was like, obviously there's pain coming from something, so I'm not really sure what it is. So he wanted me to I should go to the local hospital in Muncie and get he's like, you can get this test at any hospital, doesn't matter. But he wanted me to get a full body bone scan, which is basically a full body X-ray, at one shot. I mean, it goes from my head all the way down slowly to my feet, and it's like a complete body X-ray all at once. And if there's anything anywhere, it would show up on this test.
Okay.
And then a week or so later, he called up my parents, and he basically said that he's like, I want to send these results to some doctors that I know at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center. And that was the first time the word cancer was mentioned to me.
Right.
I was going to ask
you, when the pain started, like, when the pain started, and it like, this happened at night and then during the day, and what type of medication were you taking to help it subside? Because what were the medication back then?
I wasn't really taking anything major at the time. I'd never taken any.
Right.
Like, apart from maybe, I don't even know. I didn't really have so many severe injuries before that, so I'd never really taken any like serious painkillers. And honestly, I couldn't even take Motrin because I've been allergic to Motrin since I was a little kid.
Wow.
So I wasn't even taking Motrin.
So you were taking I was
taking basically Tylenol. And that eventually, that's what really stopped helping. It wasn't much. It wasn't like a crazy drug or anything.
Right.
Just taking Tylenol, and then eventually stopped, and that's when we got to the whole, process. But but during the whole process of when I was feeling the pain and going back and forth, and my mother was taking me to all the doctors, and we were all trying to like get answers. And I remember a conversation I had with her in the car once on the way to one of the doctors. She had, because this was like, obviously something was brewing here, and we didn't know what it was. And I think it was on the way to Dr. Levine's office even. She basically asked me straight up, she was just like, what's your worst fear? What are you most afraid of?
Wow.
So I said, what are you afraid that it could be? Like, what are you most afraid that it would be, Because obviously there's something. So I said to her, I'm just afraid that it's something that can't be cured. I don't even know. We can't even find out what it is, and we're having such trouble diagnosing it. Then I want it to be something that can be fixed, obviously.
Right.
And in the back of my, I didn't want to. I was so afraid of this word, the word cancer. I didn't even know how to express it to my mother.
Right.
But when I said to her, I just want it to be something that could be cured, the word cancer was like popping up in my head as the thing that can't be cured, because I didn't know. The most knowledge I had at this point of cancer was being a little kid in day camp.
Right.
Camp, giving out these little things to collect money for Lifeline.
Right.
Doing like, swim-a-thon or whatever, however I collected back then, I didn't remember. But it was like pictures of kids with, one of the song, kids with cancer.
Right. Who,
I didn't know anything about them or anything about cancer or anything at all.
Right.
So I was just, I thought Lifeline was an organization that, Baruch Hashem was able to give these kids a great summer in a camp somewhere.
Right.
And unfortunately, they were going through these treatments. I don't know what happened to them after. To best of my knowledge, people who got cancer died. I have no idea. Right. So to my answer to my mother was that I basically didn't want it to be cancer either, because I didn't think it could be cured. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know anything about anything at the time.
Wow. In what year was this whole thing going on? So you were in 10th grade in what year?
So this was going for about 8 months in 2007. The beginning of 2007 it started.
Okay.
And by the end of 2007, October 2007, Erev Sukkot, I followed the process with Dr. Levine. He had recommended we go to the doctor at Sloan and discuss it, and he should read the results and see what we have.
Right.
So we met with him, and he basically said, you either have a severe bone infection, or you have some sort of mass of some sort of cancer. We're not sure what it is, and we have to do a biopsy to check for sure.
Okay. And this is Dr. Levine said this.
Dr. Levine, no, he sent me to the oncologist in Sloan.
Right. So who was the oncologist in Sloan that you went to?
Dr. Myers. Dr. Paul Myers.
Okay.
And he basically said you either have a really severe bone infection or it may be some sort of cancer. We're not 100% sure from the test, but we have to do an actual biopsy to take out a piece of it and test it and see what we're dealing with. And they recommended an open biopsy, which is they would actually make an incision, not just stick a needle in and grab some stuff. They would actually make an incision, take a significant piece, whatever they needed to test, and check what was actually wrong. So Erev Sukkot 2007, in October 2007, I was officially diagnosed with osteosarcoma, which is a it's called a bone cancer because it's a very dense form of cancer.
Right.
And at the time when I woke up from the biopsy, I just looked. I was like very groggy, and I looked up at I think my sister was on my left side, my father was on my right side, and I just grabbed somebody's hand, and I looked at them and I said, "Is it what they think it is?"
Right.
And they said yes. And we all just cried. Like we had I didn't even have to say cancer. Everybody knew, like, yeah, you have cancer. That was, so I was diagnosed with osteosarcoma. And then the doctors came in to discuss what we were going to do about it.
Right.
And that's when I learned that there are actually options for people with cancer, Baruch Hashem, that can be treated, and can be cured, and can be,
Is osteosarcoma one of is it like a cancer that is the survival rate is much better than any other types of cancer, or is it one of those like hit and miss cancers if you catch it in time?
Yeah, so it seemed to be. It was the way they explained it to me. It was one of those. It's found in adolescents more than adults.
Okay.
And if it's caught early enough, it definitely can be treated and be defeated. I guess you'd say.
Okay. Well, you're here to tell the tale, so
I'm here to tell the tale. So definitely that's true. It was a very significant mass because it was growing because I started having the pain and I ignored it for so long.
Right.
The cancer was found in my femur, right above my knee.
Wow.
And the tumor itself was 8 inches long. The femur is the biggest bone in a person's body.
Right.
It had obviously ample space for it to grow.
Right.
And the tumor itself was 8 inches. It was a very big tumor. And they said we had to start treatment right away, and they started to explain to me what the treatment cycle would be like.
So what was the treatment cycle like in 2007?
Yeah, so they said the recommendation they had for the protocol, they called it, the protocol for this at the time was I would start with 3 different types of chemotherapy.
Wow.
All switched off different weeks, and how they would administer them was different, but basically I would have like a week and a half of administering the chemo, and then I would have like almost 3 weeks to recover.
Right. And then another.
And they would basically the doctor explained to me they're going to inject you with a bunch of poison. They're going to try to kill all the cancer cells that they could possibly kill, and to shrink the tumor as much as possible.
Okay.
And basically try to keep me alive in the process.
Wow.
As much as that's basically what they explained.
That's pretty
so many
crazy.
words. And
were you hospitalized this whole time in MSK, or
the treatment started out? It's outpatient treatment, meaning I would go in. I would basically be there all day,
right?
Getting this chemo, and then the 3 weeks, even the 3 weeks recovery, I was still coming in for basically IV, just basic IV solution, just because they pumped me up with this poison, they called it, with the stuff, and then I would have like literally a week or two, depending on how I was doing, of just IV solution just to flush it out of my system.
Right.
As fast they got it in, and they wanted to get it out as fast as possible.
Right.
And then after that, my body would react to it by my white cell count dropping severely to almost zero.
Wow.
And any fever that I got during that time, I would have to go directly to the hospital. So then I was in the hospital more often than not. I went into the hospital during those weeks when my counts were down. I would just spike a fever at any point and just rush back to the hospital.
So this is still when you're in high school. So what happened when you so you got the diagnosis, you started treatments, and you were in and out of the hospital. How did that affect high school for JJ Eizik?
So, I mean, in the beginning, it basically completely brought it to a halt because we had no clue
Right.
what we were doing. We had no clue where, we got thrown into this world of like medical and doctors and craziness. So until we figured out what we were dealing with, sorry,
Yeah.
go nuts. Until we figured out what we were dealing with, we didn't really know what to do. And I was obviously in the hospital, so I wasn't going to school. I wasn't really like in touch with my friends. I was kind of just thrown into this whole situation. And eventually, as we progressed, and as we were able to deal with certain things, and I was at home for extended periods of time, so I happened to be, I was very lucky. That the school that I attended was literally 5 houses down from my house. It was on my
Wow, thank you, Hashem. Beautiful.
And in Muncie that never happened, but it happens to be that the school bought this a mansion that used to be. It basically used to be a mansion, this house, and they converted it to the school.
Right.
And it was 5 houses down from me. So a lot of times, so sometimes, depending how I was doing, depending on my status, whether I could have visitors, I couldn't have visitors. Sometimes my Rebbe would bring the class, and he would actually give shiur in my house.
Wow, that's
to
amazing.
Be able to, for me to be able to interact.
Right.
With kids. And another thing that they did was we set up a camera system. Basically, it was almost like a surveillance camera in the classroom.
Right.
And if I was feeling up to it, I was able to log in at any time.
Right.
Either listen to shiur or listen to class or listen to whatever, just to be able to participate in some way.
Wow. So you pretty much you did not go back to the physical yeshiva, and they came to you a lot if you were healthy enough and able to be exposed to other people with normal immune. No,
right.
No,
if my immune system was still stable, somewhat stable, I was able to have visitors. If not, I would have to just be home. And then they weren't. I had a great group of guys in my class. They would call me. They would we'd do some video chats here and there.
Right.
I would be on the screen with the classroom.
Right.
With the camera, I mean, in the classroom.
Yeah.
So that was good. But otherwise, I was either in the hospital or home, or I did not go back to yeshiva for a very long time.
Wow. Okay. So you're home, Baruch Hashem, then. And how did you get involved with Lifeline and eventually get to Camp Simcha as a camper?
So I was diagnosed in October, which is the very beginning of the school. The summer wasn't till June, July. So when I was thrown into this whole world of medicine and doctors and all kinds of stuff, we had no clue where to turn.
Right.
That's when Lifeline really came into our lives and really helped us navigate everything and do what we needed to do, and especially during the treatments, which we'll get to, helping us get to different doctors and different opinions and different complicated issues with surgeries. It really had a lot of people with a lot of different areas of Lifeline to help us with a lot of different things. Right. They were really there for us, and mostly because volunteers also coming to visit and just to help us smile a little bit through this whole ordeal.
Right.
And then eventually, a lot of the volunteers that I met started to talk to me about Camp Simcha and and I didn't.
How old were you then? How old were you in 10th grade, if I may ask?
I was 16 when I was diagnosed. Okay. And I didn't want to, like, when I first got there, I didn't want to leave my room.
Right.
I was so scared and new to this whole thing. I didn't want to leave my room, and these guys are trying to talk to me about going to camp, with a bunch of kids who also have cancer. I had no clue what any of this was. So I was very apprehensive about the whole idea. But they had a whole year to work on me.
Right.
And eventually I went to camp. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So during the year you had lots of treatments, I'm assuming surgeries also. You had a lot of surgeries during that year. Or no?
Yeah, not so many. During the first year, I had just one major. I had a couple of procedures here and there.
Right.
One major surgery. Basically, what they said was The protocol is about 10 or 11 months, depending on how the
Okay.
treatment, how I react to the chemo.
Right.
And basically, they would do a little more than half of the chemo before like a major corrective surgery, and then they would continue chemo after to basically and the surgery was they were gonna actually remove the tumor,
Right.
and the chemo they continued after would be to any stray cells that may have gone somewhere else in my body can hopefully the chemo after the surgery will
Wow.
get rid of those cells. So basically that's how the protocol worked. So I had in January 2008,
Mhm.
I had a major first of a bunch of surgeries, but first
Yeah.
major surgery I ever had was basically a resection of my femur. They would remove the tumor, they would replace it with like a fake bone almost, and they would
Okay.
hopefully fuse to each end of the bone, and they would remove the tumor properly, whatever. They had a whole big complicated thing how they did it. It was a lot of years ago already. I can't remember all the details, but
Right.
I
Okay.
remember the surgery itself was 14 hours,
Wow.
and it was a major job. And basically, my father told me when I woke up, he said, a couple of hours ago, the doctor came out to us and said, your son is now cancer free. And we were all, breathed a sigh of relief. And then I woke up from the surgery and, I had to continue the chemo, obviously.
Right.
But we were, moving in the right direction. So by the time the summer rolled around, when I was going to camp, I was already officially cancer free, and I was just supposed to be recovering. So
Right.
I was on crutches still, because from the
Right.
surgery, I couldn't put weight on my leg.
Right.
But I was, in the summer. By the time the summer came, I was going to. They convinced me to go to camp, and I was already growing my hair back. I had lost my
Right.
hair from all the chemo, but I was already growing my hair back. I was just getting some strength back. There was one weird thing about my whole recovery was that I
Yeah.
was doing a lot of physical therapy, but my
Right.
knee it was swollen, and it was getting more swollen, and
Ooh.
something was off about my knee, and we weren't sure what. But they basically for then said continue to physical therapy and continue and see how it goes through the summer. So through the
Okay.
summer it was just continued recovery and physical therapy.
Right.
And I actually went back to I went back to yeshiva when the school year started. I went to yeshiva in Queens. I was 12th
Right.
grade, to yeshiva in
Right.
Queens, and I moved into the dorms and everything, and I was like trying to get back to being a regular kid again.
Right.
But I still had all this pain, and I was still going to doctors at least once a month.
Right.
So recently having had this ordeal, this cancer.
Right.
But I was trying to reacclimate myself to back to regular life.
Right.
And then I had and once a month was to see the doctor, but also at least once a month I was doing follow-up scans of
Right.
blood.
Okay.
So they were noticing some things that were a little irregular, and then they did a bone scan and I think a PET scan.
Okay.
And on one of these, I forgot which, but on one of these scans, they saw that the bone graft that they put in to my leg wasn't
Right.
fusing to one of the sites of the surgery. One of the surgery sites, the bone
Right.
was fusing,
Okay.
so it wasn't healing basically. So they said that's probably the cause of the swelling, and there may be an infection there. So
Right.
basically, they're going to go in and clean out whatever infection might be there, and just to fix it. And they were going to take they were going to actually cut. They were going to make a scar on my hip, and actually take live bone graft from me and put it down near the bottom of the femur to
Right.
actually help the bone just to heal, to fuse.
Wow.
That was their plan for that surgery. So it wasn't a crazy like 15-hour, 14-hour surgery.
Right.
It was a big surgery that they were going to take, remove the bone graft, clean the infection. Hopefully that would, correct the problem. And I woke up from that surgery. So this was also around. It kind of followed the same path as the first
Right.
surgery. It was right around October, right around Sukkot time.
Yeah.
I think it was even Cholamoid. It was Cholamoid. It was Cholamoid. It was right before. I think it was right before Sukkot also.
Okay.
And I went in for the surgery, and they went over the whole plan again. They told me what was going to go on, and I woke up from the surgery, and there was a few doctors in my room. My parents were there.
Okay.
And
When doctors are in the room, it's not a good sign.
It was there was too many people in the room, and I even right when I woke up, I was like, something's not right here. And I even looked at my hip, and I was like, wait, there's no scar here. What happened? Like, they didn't do the bone graft,
Right.
you know? And at the time, I think my father like noticed my face and noticed what was going on. It happens to be my Rebbe was there, one of my very close Rebbeim. He was there, and he was standing with my father. I remember my father told me this after. He was talking to my Rebbe, and he's like, what am I going to tell JJ? He's going to figure this out. Like, what, we got to tell him. So what was he not telling me? So the doctors basically said that when they went in to clean out the infection, they actually found that the cancer had grown back again.
Oh my gosh.
So I would have to start a new protocol of treatment, and basically it was even more intense chemo, stronger chemo and different, things, and you would have the same. I would have the same process as the first year. It was basically chemo, surgery, chemo, but the surgery in the middle was where the big debate would come up of what type of surgery to do, because most of the doctors were recommending it came back in your leg for a second time. Like, we want to eliminate that possibility.
Right.
We have to remove we have to move the odds in our favor as much as we can. So basically, my oncologist was recommending that I get a full leg amputation, like straight up. There's no two ways about it. You have to do this. You don't want to have cancer again, obviously. So, that was what we were faced with at the time. But I had to start the chemo right away.
Right.
And do whatever I could to, help shrink the tumor, get the whole thing back. And it was in my knee, so it wasn't like they could rebuild the knee, but it was much more difficult. And the first time they didn't get enough margin, so they were very worried about it. They were just like, yeah, full leg amputation, hip disarticulation, the whole deal, like, complete leg amputation, everything. And it was like, for them, there was no debate about it.
Right.
By the time the chemo was, by the time the chemo protocol was coming closer to the surgery time, that's when we started, we basically traveled the world, looking for, it wasn't really the world. We went to Israel, and we went to a few different states just to talk to different doctors in terms of what my options might be for surgery. If there was any less invasive option or any.
And what were the options?
So at the time, there was options were
besides the full leg amputation.
Correct. That was the first.
Which we'll get to.
And I had a friend who had gone through treatment right before me who recommended, he had a very good surgeon. He recommended him. He wasn't in Sloan, but he was in one of the nearby hospitals in New York City, and he helped us get an appointment with him. And we went to see him, and he actually recommended that I can do what's called an above knee amputation, which still leaves me with some leg, to actually use inside a prosthetic. He was explaining to me what a prosthetic would mean and all that, which we'll get to because I have I wear a prosthetic.
Right.
And he was explaining to me, what that would mean, but he basically said it's a completely different life, just at least to have some limb there just to be able to control the prosthetic better, just to be able to walk properly and have a more normal life with a prosthetic. He said there's no reason you need a hip disarticulation, which was the full leg amputation, it's called. And he said there's no reason for that. I don't think that's necessary. He wouldn't say it was wrong, but he was like, I don't think it's necessary.
Right.
And even I could even recommend to you that you can have a limb sparing surgery. You could save your leg, and they would just rebuild the leg from the knee to the hip and rebuild the inside. And that whole him and his mentor were actually at the forefront at the time of building technologies for limb sparing surgeries.
Wow.
This doctor himself was doing it for shoulders, so the person wouldn't have to lose their arm. It was like building basically synthetic or titanium shoulders.
Wow.
For people to be able to still have their arms and use them and everything else. And he said, if you don't believe me, I will send you to my mentor, who's the chief of orthopedic surgery in Washington, D.C.
Wow.
And it was Thursday. This was a Thursday. I remember this because this was a Thursday night, and it was 2008.
Right.
So it was it was an election year, and the inauguration was going to be on Monday.
Oh wow!
So if we went to D.C. on Monday, we wouldn't. First of all, we wouldn't get in, and if we got in, we wouldn't get out.
Right.
So it was Thursday night. So he called up this doctor, his teacher, on his personal cell phone.
Yeah.
Got us an appointment for the next morning at 10:00.
Wow. In Washington.
In Washington, yeah. So we had to drive. So we drove. It was winter, by the way, winter Shabbos.
Right.
So getting back to Muncie after a 10:00 appointment in Washington doing winter Shabbos.
That's cutting it close.
I was having a bunch of Lifeline Chevra over at my house for Shabbos.
Oh, nice.
It was a big trip. So we went, and we actually woke up at 5 a.m. in Muncie.
Okay.
Drove down to Washington, and we spoke to him. And basically, what he said was he was, echoing what his student had told us
right
before. Was that you could do an above knee amputation without a question. And you could, if you wanted to do a limb sparing surgery, you could, save your leg. But he explained to me the limitations of that in terms of being able to live a certain way. If you wanted to, if I wanted to be more active, with the limb sparing surgery, I would never be able to run again. I would never be able to be as active as I wanted.
Right.
And as time was progressing, since I got the news of the second cancer and having that I would probably have to have an amputation, I was doing research on prosthetics and what life is like with prosthetics for months already.
Right.
And the videos I was seeing, especially then, of soldiers coming back from the war and getting prosthetic legs, prosthetic limbs, and they were soldiers and they were doing like all kinds of crazy things. They were running, they were riding bikes, they were running, they were playing sports, they were mountain climbing. So like, if a person could still be that active with a prosthetic, and it would lower the chances, actually removing the leg would lower the chances of it coming back, obviously. So I wanted to do, something in between. That's where I was at. I wasn't sure that I wanted to do the limb sparing surgery.
Right.
He said, you have to make the choice. And my parents said to me, like, this is a choice you have to make. It's up to you how you want your, how you want to live your life.
Wow.
So we left that appointment, and we actually made plans to little after that we made plans to go to Eretz Yisrael,
right,
just to collect brachas and to speak to different medical people and speak to all the rabbanim that we could go and all the rebbes we could possibly go to and all the rabbanim we could possibly get appointments in, just to get brachas and chizuk. And so we actually
I was going to ask you, did you like go through Gedolim? Did you ask them the Shaila? What?
So we actually presented the Shaila to a few of them, and some of them answered, some of them didn't, some of them just gave me brachas. You can have refuah shlema, Baruch Hashem was very good.
Right.
The one we did go to that was really major, that we really asked the Shaila to, we gave him all the pratim of the Shaila.
Right.
Was Chaim Kanievsky itself.
Okay. Wow.
And we actually we first tried to give him all the stuff, and we had a whole paper with my name and everything. And it was a very how they get people through. You go in.
Right. It's 1, 2, 3. Right. 1, 2, 3.
And you go. So that was the first interaction. And he said bracha batzlacha and a ganzer refuah shlema. So that was a little extra, even from a big deal. But the gabbai who we became very close with through a neighbor of ours, a neighbor of my parents. When this gabbai comes to America, he stays at this neighbor's house.
Okay.
So when we were going to Eretz Yisrael, he said, "I'm going to get you in touch with this guy, and he's going to take you to Chaim. He's going to take care of you." So he became, because of this neighbor of ours, he became friends with us, and he was taking care of us. And he saw on my face that I was a little bit dejected. I wanted to hear something, because I was suffering already so much. I wanted to hear something
more.
I needed a little more. He saw in my face I needed a little more chizuk. Right. So he asked me. He said, "When are you guys leaving Eretz Yisrael?" I said, "We're leaving next Thursday." Whatever.
The gabbai
said, "When are you leaving Eretz Yisrael?" Yeah, the gabbai. Okay. When are you leaving Eretz Yisrael? So I said, "We're leaving next Thursday, whatever the day was." And, midnight flight out of Eretz Yisrael on Thursday. We get back for Shabbos.
Right.
So he said, "Before you go to the airport, come back."
Okay.
He gave us a time to come back, and he took us around the back of Reb Chaim's house, all the way to the back stairs, all the way upstairs to his private study, and where nobody else goes. he had someone in there right before us who was like getting a special bracha. And at the time, and we walked in and we actually see a person with a camera. So he hired, because he really wanted to take care of us and
Right.
know how I felt. He actually hired a photographer to take pictures of my meeting.
Wow. Wow.
And so while the photographer's there setting up the camera, he didn't want to like waste time by Reb Chaim, so he starts asking him questions. He's like, "Is there something that this bacher can do as a zechus for his leg?" And he started telling him the shayla and asking him things. So, but the first thing Reb Chaim said was, "Yeah, he should learn Hilchas Chol HaMoed." It's very random, not really sure. So he said, "So what's pshat? Why?" He said, "Because it's a Gemara in Yerushalmi Ma'aseh Sheni, and it's a medrash in Echazuta."
Okay.
And we have pictures. I was like to learn a piece of Gemara with Reb Chaim.
Wow.
And he showed us the Gemara and he explained to us the pshat. Basically, there was a whole story in the Gemara about different people having different ailments with their legs. And the end of the medrash echoes the Gemara. The end of the medrash says, "Mida keneged mida, regel beregel." And the Gemara calls moyed kol moyed regel.
Right.
If the person was mavaz of the moyed, he wouldn't have what to eat, and he showed his leg in a dream a certain way that he had something wrong with his leg. So the people that were mavaz of the moyed were inflicted with this ailment in their legs. So in their dream, so Rabbi Kiva was the time Rabbi Kiva was answering them. Mida keneged mida, regel beregel. That you're because you're
right.
So in order to counteract any ailments of the regel, he recommended Hilchas Chol HaMoed. So that's my daily after Shachris I learn a little sif of
Wow.
Chol HaMoed. That's my every day. That's my thing. He said, like you put on tefillin every day, you should learn a thing of Hilchas Chol HaMoed every day. It's like So that was that, and we explained to him the whole shaila, and at that point I had already come to terms with the fact that I would have to have my leg amputated in some way.
Right.
So I told Reb Chaim, I said, listen, I think that best for me, what I feel is, he usually I shouldn't say it, but first let me preface like this.
Yeah.
Usually if a person comes to Reb Chaim with two different sides, two different opinions, and one is like much more severe than the other, he'll find some way to he'll steer you in the direction of doing the easier option.
Right.
So, and I said I don't necessarily. The easiest option was the limb sparing surgery, and I would keep my leg, and I would have basic functionality. But I explained. I said I wanted to eliminate the chances of the cancer coming back as much as I could, as much as I possibly could, and I still wanted to have some sort of normal, living. So I felt that living with a prosthetic wasn't as bad as these other two options. So he said he said you should be ba'atzlacha, and you should go with that option. You could do the above knee amputation instead of the full leg amputation.
Right.
Instead of limb sparing, go with the middle option basically. And that's what we did.
Wow.
We booked the surgery with the surgeon that my friend had recommended. It was in Mount Sinai Hospital in New York City. And January 19th, 2009.
Wow, you even remember that date. That's quite amazing.
I do. That is, yes.
Wow. What did it feel like waking up after that surgery?
So it's very interesting. Actually, going into surgery, so they have the entire team comes in and actually signs their name on my leg. This is literally the only reason they do this is so that they don't amputate they don't amputate the wrong leg.
Right. Okay.
Make sure they get the left one in this case. They want to make sure they get the left one.
I was thinking that they're giving you the leg as a memorial for you.
So they all came in and they explained what was going to happen. And it's funny, when I woke up from surgery, I had like this, it sort of looked like a cast.
Right.
Laying next to me, laying in front of me, really. When I woke up, I wasn't in pain because they had to give me, gave me what's called a femoral block, which is an injection of pain medication directly into my spinal cord from my waist down.
Spinal cord. Wow. Okay.
From my waist down, I didn't feel anything because the pain would be too severe to wake up to. So they had to do some sort of major painkiller. So that's what they did. And the other thing that they did was it looked like sort of like a cast. It was laying
Okay.
in front of me where my leg should be technically. Because they said if my eyes wake up and don't see a leg, your brain could go into shock because you went to sleep with
Right.
two legs.
Right.
Completely, you know. So I went to sleep with two legs. They put me to sleep with two legs for surgery, and I wake
Right.
up with one. My brain could actually go into shock. So
Right.
they build this like artificial, just so my eyes could see something there, to like get
Okay.
my brain used to the fact that I just had this major,
Right.
surgery. I was in bed for 3 days. I
Okay.
couldn't move, and the doctors, of course, were coming in saying, "Oh, the physical therapist is going to get you out of bed today." I'm like, "Yeah, sure they are." Not happening. It's one of those, because once they took off the
leg.
major painkiller, I was like, "Okay, this is not."
Uh huh.
So,
Wow.
so they did eventually get me out of bed. They took off this cast thing, and actually still have it. It's funny. So they took it, and I was able to, kind of hop and walker, and I
Right.
was, getting used to my new
Your new life.
normal, I guess they call it. Yeah.
So after surgery and whatever, how long you were in the hospital for? Like 4 days? How long were you there for?
So no, after the surgery, I was in the hospital for about a month.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I was there for about, because I had to recover, and then I had to
Right.
start chemo as soon as possible because they had to continue the chemo.
Right.
And so I actually started it not in Sloan. I started it when I was still recovering in Mount Sinai.
In Mount Sinai.
My treatment there for a while. So I stayed in while I started the chemo up again,
Wow.
and then eventually I was able to go home and recover a little more.
Wow. Wow. So this is all in 2009, right? If I'm not mistaken.
This January
This
2000 that I just started, and this is where I was at into that, and I continued chemo until about June of that year, and then I was officially supposed to be, I was officially cancer free again, and everything was, wasn't back to normal, but it was a new,
Right.
new,
Normal. New normal.
My second summer in Camp Simcha was then, and I was trying to get my strength back, and
Right.
I had just, because I was doing chemo and the surgeries and everything, it was like I cut it really close, but I just got my first prosthetic right before the summer.
Right. So I was going to ask you, when did you get your first prosthetic?
Yeah, I think it was.
And how was that? How did that work?
Chemo might have been until May, and then like it was like a month or two.
How did that feel? Getting a prosthetic leg.
It was interesting because I was under this false impression that, like, because of all the research I did and all the videos I was seeing, of all these people walking around with prosthetics, I thought it was just like, you clip it on, or however you get it on. I didn't know.
Right.
However they clip it on, and they just like, okay, then you walk again. It's like, oh.
Right.
But it's a lot more complicated than that, and I had to. It's basically it's a big suction cup that like
Right.
holds on to my whatever limb is there.
I have seen it. It.
Yes,
it's pretty.
exactly.
It's pretty
to
cool.
the audience, that
pretty cool.
It's this big suction thing that holds on to my leg, and from there I control it. Problem is, size changes, or the weather, even the weather affects it. Now in summer, even now, like I'm 15 years later, the weather still affects it a lot.
Right.
So it was in the very beginning. It was like just my first time. So
Right.
I'd take a few steps and it would come off, and it was very, very frustrating in the beginning using the prosthetic. But by the time summer came around, it was a few weeks already. I was doing a lot of intense physical therapy with it, and I was like really progressing pretty fast. And I was able to basically walk with it. I think I still had crutches or a cane with it, but I was able to basically walk by the time the summer came around.
Was there someone in your life then that also had a prosthetic that you were friends with, or you didn't? And how did that come? I know you are friends with someone that has a prosthetic.
Yeah,
how did that?
Yes. So there's a guy. His name is Yitzi Hamer. Amazing guy.
Right. Yeah.
He came to when I had known him from before.
Right.
He came to visit me a couple of times in the hospital. I knew him from a few years before that.
Okay.
And when he heard that I was having the surgery, He drove right away. He lives in Long Island. He drove right away, all the way to Muncie. It was like a Muncie
Wow.
Shabbos or something. It was the middle of the night, basically the
Yeah.
middle of the night. He
Okay.
drove right away to Muncie, came to my house, and he even took off his prosthetic, and he showed me everything. He was telling me what it's like to walk with it, and how it is, and what it feels like, and how things are different, how they're better, how they're not better. Different types of options for prosthetics, and it was the very first introduction I had. But it was an amazing chizuk to see somebody like him,
Right.
Walking around, married with kids,
Right.
And functions with a prosthetic in a very similar situation to me.
Did he also have the same type of cancer that you had?
He did, yeah.
Oh wow.
And that's when I started to really believe that, okay, I could do this.
Right.
It's going to be hard, and obviously I didn't understand it until I was wearing the prosthetic, how
Right.
frustrating it could be and how difficult it could be to get used to it. But it was the first glimpse that I had that I really could, I think I could do this.
Wow. So back in June of 2009, or June or July, whatever it was, you went back up to camp, and you were still a camper, obviously, right? Because you were still in
Yeah, it was my second summer
treatment. Who? I know you were very good friends. I don't know if you still are, but he was in camp then. Ari Atherstein. How did you get to him? I mean, obviously he was in camp as a counselor and staff, but did you know him the first year that you were in camp, or you only got to know him in 2009?
Yeah, so the first year, when I first started treatment, he was one of the volunteers that would actually come to visit me in the hospital.
Oh, okay.
He was one of the guys that really was pushing me to come to camp.
Got it.
At the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I haven't spoken to him in many, many years, but we still try to get in touch every once in a while. Somehow it never works out.
Right.
But he was an amazing friend, and he really got me through a lot. And he got me to camp. He was one of the guys who got me to camp.
Right.
Yeah.
So then 2009. Okay. What after 2009? After camp in 2009, you went back to yeshiva, or what did you do then?
Yeah. Yes, I actually went back. It was first year bis medrash. I went.
Okay.
I was getting used to walking around normally. Right. I was functioning a lot better with the prosthetic, and happens to be the office that I was going to for prosthetics, for building the prosthetic and everything,
right,
was actually in Long Island.
Oh wow!
At the time, so I was in Queens for yeshiva, so it wasn't a far ride. If I needed anything, I'd go back, I'd go get adjustments, whatever, things like that. So it was first year bis medrash, and I wanted to, just get back to being a normal kid,
right,
a normal guy. So I went back to yeshiva. I tried my best to throw myself back into yeshiva as much as I could.
Right.
But when I was able to be there, I was, otherwise I was at the doctor or whatever. But whenever I was in yeshiva, I tried to, be in yeshiva, and it was very good. It was a great year. Still very, very close with my Rebbe from that year.
Okay.
He's he also helped me, give me a lot of chizuk and a lot of and it was my first full year, because I had 2 years where going back and forth with doctors, and then I was diagnosed with cancer again. It was my first full year of completely being clean. I didn't have any issues. I had doctor's appointments once a month or more, and the scans were clear and everything was good. And the entire year was amazing. It was great, and I was starting to get back into things and starting to get back to life and everything else. And then I went back to Camp Simcha, actually, for another summer that year as a camper. And then I went back to yeshiva again for second year. And during second year, bis medrash, right after Rosh Hashanah, right before Rosh Hashanah, one of my scans came up. They saw something they didn't like in my lungs, actually. So they had to do some kind of a surgery. So they were going to remove whatever they saw. And they were like, yeah, it might not be it. It might be something else, whatever. But they said basically you could, they took it out and they tested, and the cancer came back for a third time.
Right. I'm just gonna interject.
Yeah.
I remember when everyone heard that the news that JJ had cancer again for the third time. That was it was it was head over heels.
It was heavy. It was very heavy. Yes.
Yeah.
So the doctor at the time said people can, it can come back in the lungs, and that's why we're seeing it now.
Right.
People can live with 5 or 6 or 7 chest surgeries, just removing the tumors as they come back, and they don't necessarily have to do anything about it.
Okay.
That's what people do. Sometimes people do that. So I said the first time I was like, I had enough chemo, I had enough of all this crazy other stuff. I was just like, just take it out, just get it over with, just do it already. Let's go. I was like, I was just getting back to being normal again, whatever normal means with a
right.
aesthetic and everything else. But I was just getting back to being myself. I was like, just take it out, just go. And so they took out the tumor.
Yeah.
And then I was recovered from that surgery. It wasn't as complicated. It was they basically removed a section of my lung. They didn't want to do margins. There's three pockets in everybody's lung.
Okay.
Took on the right side of my lung, the upper part, and they took it out. They just took out the entire piece. So I have like half a lung on one side. They were like, we're not taking margin. We're not doing any of this. We're not taking out the actual tumor. We're just taking out the piece. We're like, let's go. So I said, okay, listen, if that's what we have to do and this was the third time, so they didn't want to take any chances.
Right.
So they took it out, and I recovered from that surgery, and I went back to yeshiva, and again tried to get back to everything. I wasn't doing any treatments at the time, so it was
right.
Okay. But, and then I was doing scans again, like I said, once a month at least.
Right.
And right after, I think it was right before the summer, like around Shavuos time, like 8 or 9 months later, they saw another mass on my lungs again. So this was number 4.
Right.
And so they couldn't take out any more of my lungs, so they had to actually take the tumor out. But they said, we're going to take out, and this time we recommend that you should actually do something about it. Like, you should try to, there's all kinds of, new therapies being developed.
Right.
New clinical trials. We recommend, there's like 3 of them we can choose from, and like this is one we most recommend, whatever it was, and you should do it. And it was basically a shot, not a shot, an infusion once a week.
Yeah.
And it was the very beginning. Now they're used all the time, but this is the very beginning of, I think it's what they call immunotherapy, where like basically these types of treatments are designed to teach the person's own immune system to fight cancer on its own.
Wow.
This was like the introduction to that whole thing.
And this was the trial that our friend also took, right? Benjamin Weinreb, right?
I don't remember. I don't know if this was the same one. Could be. There was a lot of them at the time. I don't know.
Okay.
But I don't remember. But there was. So I joined this trial, and I was doing, so basically my schedule became that every Thursday I would go from yeshiva to this, to get this treatment. And from there I would go home for Shabbos and recover and go back to yeshiva.
Right.
That was my, my basic schedule for that whole year.
What were the side effects of that trial?
So I had, in the hospital, they expected I would have my body would, it was basically a very very strong immune response, a strong immediate immune response.
Okay.
So I would have like tremors and shakes and everything, and they would give me medication to stop them because they knew that my body was reacting to the medicine. And once my body was calmed down, everything else, I was able to leave and go home and recover. It was much less intense, obviously, than all the chemo I had went through.
Right.
And it was only once a week. And it didn't affect my my white blood cells or anything. It was much less invasive, I guess.
Wow.
And I did that for a few months. I don't remember how long it was. It's a long time ago. And we completed the trial, and my scans were coming up clean the whole time, Baruch Hashem. And I went through another year. It was pretty clean. It was basically clean. It was not pretty. It was clean, but it was almost a year. It wasn't completely.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then towards the end of that time, I was going for another scan, and they actually saw another mass came back on my sternum, which is the breastbone, the center of your chest, where your ribs come together. It was actually on the bone again. So this wasn't like in my lungs where it was like
Right.
tissue. Just take it out.
Right.
Yeah, this was another. It would be another major surgery because they would have to actually open up my chest and like remove part of the bone or remove some. They would have to do something major. So and there was no chemos left that I could do. So I couldn't do chemo even if they wanted to.
Right.
But I couldn't anyway. They said my body was completely. We don't have any chemos to offer you, and your body can't take them anymore. So there's no. So they recommended another clinical trial to go on. So I started. They recommended do the surgery first and then start this new medication. So I went to the chief of thoracic surgery at Sloan Kettering, who had basically two options for me. There was a certain type of needle, a radiation needle they could stick in and actually like almost explode or just dissipate the tumor, basically destroy the tumor right with this needle, and much less invasive surgery. But he thinks it would react well and would be able to do it. The only issue is that using such a needle so close to my heart would endanger my heart, my health, my heart, my life, possibly. It was much more risky. The other option was just to do an open chest surgery, remove the sternum, and replace it with whatever they replace it with.
Right.
Cement and wire and however they held it together. But that's basically what it is.
Yeah.
And that was like less risky, I guess, but much more invasive surgery.
Right.
So this was actually the second time we planned the trip to Eretz Yisrael. We went back to all the Gedolim to get brachas again.
Right.
And we actually brought there's a doctor in Bnei Brak who took care of Reb Chaim a lot at the time. So we actually were able to get in touch with him and bring him with us to explain, in like to explain the medical terminology and the medical situation in a way that Reb Chaim would really,
understand.
Somebody that he talks to all the time, especially about medical things, his doctor. So we actually brought him in, and he was able to explain to Reb Chaim the different options, and Reb Chaim gave us a bracha that we should do just the open chest surgery and don't risk the heart or anything.
Right.
That, and Mitzvah Hashem, I would have a full recovery before Shlema, and he said, you're going to get married, you're going to have children. Give me a real straight bracha like that. You're going to get married, you're going to have children. Hashem, and you'll have a long, I think he said even a long life. And with Reb Steinman, he said the same thing. It was very, very big.
At that point, you needed all those brachas. If I'm not mistaken, it's at least 4 or 5 times.
This is the 5th. Yeah, this was the 5th. And I didn't mention in the first trip we had gone to Reb David Abuchatzera. This was a part of the story I wanted to mention also.
Yeah. During
the first trip, I was about to have this leg amputation surgery.
Right.
We were just explaining the situation to him, and we said, this was the situation. This was what was happening, and he said, and I was crying. My father was crying to him, like, "What are we going to do?" And he was holding our hands. He said, "I'm going to daven for you. It's going to be okay. Don't worry." And he'll have refuah shlema. It's going to be good. And then he gave us a big brachas and a lot of really nice, really, really good chizuk. We spoke with him for, I don't know, probably 10 minutes or so, a little more. And he, at the end of the first meeting I had with him that year, that first trip I went to Israel.
Right. He
said, as we're leaving, he says, "Oh, by the way, when it comes back in your lungs, don't worry, you'll be fine." And I didn't even, it didn't register in my head. I didn't say. And my father, we heard him, and we were like, "What's going on?" And of course, my mother waited outside, and my father tells my mother, and he's like, they're both going crazy. Like, what's the deal? Why did he tell us this? What's this? Whatever. We couldn't think about it right then, but at least he gave us, brachas and chizuk, and that's what we held on to. And it happens to be there was a guy right behind us in the line who followed me outside, and he said, I just want you to know something. I know you seem like you're worried about something, but just want you to know something. I live here in this area of Israel, and I come to Reb David every single week before Shabbos, and I get brachas from him. I have not seen him give brachas like that to anybody ever.
Wow.
Your son's going to be fine. Like that's what he said, and he walked away. That was it.
Wow. Well, for Reb David,
that was a big like chizik for us also.
Right,
so,
but
for
Reb David Abu Chatzir to say something like that to you and like to be shocked.
I wasn't sure what to make of it. At the time I was like completely lost. I had no clue what it meant, and we couldn't worry about it. Like it's going to come back. Be mean. Like I had cancer. Twice already, and I was like, "What's going on?" Like, okay, whatever. I couldn't think about it. So we put it out of our minds at the time, and then obviously came back in my lungs twice, and then the sternum. So right before the big surgery, the sternum,
right
there, it's Israel, like I was saying.
Yeah.
And we went back to Reb David. One of the trips was we went to Chaim, obviously, like I said.
Right.
One of the appointments we had was with Reb David again. So we went to Rabbi David, and we went inside, and I told him my name again, and I started telling him the story.
Mm-hmm.
And then he finished the story for me, like he remembered me. Almost.
Wow.
So I said I had cancer in my leg, and then it came back in my leg, and I was having an amputation, and then it came back in your lungs, right? Like that's what he said to me. I was like, yeah, that's me, and I said,
did you tell him
what?
Did you tell him that it came back twice in your lungs?
Yeah. I said it came back once, and then they did surgery, and then it came back again, and he was like shaking his head. He was like listening to this, listening to what I was saying, and then I said, now it's in my sternum, and it's in the middle of my chest, and they were, wondering what surgery to do, and I think we're gonna, do the surgery with open surgery. And I was explaining the whole story, whatever. And I was like also crying again. I was like, I had suffered so much until now,
right.
7 years of just treatments and surgeries and craziness.
Yeah.
I just looked at him and I said, is this ever going to end? Like, when is this over? Like, I just asked him that. I was just like, it was very, very candid. I didn't know how else to say it. I just said,
right.
Is this ever going to, be over? And he looked at me and he closed his eyes for a second. He was holding my hand. And he said, yeah, now it's finished. Don't worry. I said, okay, I'll take it. Okay, I don't know what that means. I don't know what that's supposed to mean or anything. I was just, I needed, maybe
right.
I needed to hear right at that moment, but
right.
I heard it from him, so I got some chizik from that.
Wow. And how many years ago was this? So now we're in 2023.
I don't exactly remember. It's a lot of years ago, and it's a lot of things all at the same time. I don't remember exactly when it was.
Wow. So cancer survivor 5 times. Do you know anyone else in our circles that had cancer and survived 5 times?
Personally, no. I don't.
Wow.
And unfortunately, many of the really, really close friends, the closest bonds that a person could possibly make is when a person's going through a hard time.
Right.
And somebody else is going through a hard time as well. Together with them, those are some of the closest friendships a person can make. And unfortunately, I had 9 friends, some of them younger than me. Some of them were as young as 5 or 6 years old.
Right.
That were going through the treatments with me. Some of them were a little older than me, 30, 32, 35. And I had 9 friends that went through with me, and 8 of them passed away.
I'm gonna try to name a couple of them because I think I know some that you're talking about. Benjamin Weinrib, survivor.
He was before me, so I didn't.
Right, but you were friends with him.
I was friendly with him. I was talking about kids that I went through. Mama went through.
Oh, so I'm not really sure if I.
So no, those. Yeah. I was very close with those guys. But
right.
They helped me get through it because they had gone through it prior to me.
Chaim David.
What's that?
Chaim David.
Yeah.
He went through with it. You or the same time you?
I think also might have been either right before or we overlapped a little bit. I think.
Right, you overlapped. I know you because you went on that. Yeah. You went on that trip with Ari Anderstein to LA.
Right.
For a couple of days. But who did you go with?
Oh, I don't remember.
It was you.
It's a long time ago. Oh my
I think
goodness.
Chaim David went, and
Could be.
maybe Binyamin went.
I think he might have gone on the first couple. There was a few trips, but yeah, I think.
No, one trip I remember it was like for a week or something. It wasn't.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. Wow. So.
But yeah, so we are here to tell the story, Baruch Hashem.
That's your story. But now, how did you get into chef? How did you? You're a sous chef.
That's true.
So,
yeah. So
how did you get that? How did you get into it?
So I always had a knack for cooking.
Okay.
And I went into. I had to do something. I'm trying to think of how to say this. When I finished my treatments and everything, I was actually in the middle of the newest treatment cycle that I was starting.
Okay.
And it was every 3 months I had to go to the hospital, get like a shot. It was
right.
It was even less painful and less invasive than the other kind of shots.
Right.
But I had to go once every 3 months to get a shot. It was like a injection, an infusion, and then I would do. I think I did some scans even then, or that was in between, whatever it was.
Right.
And then I would come back 3 months later. So I was talking to my parents about it, and I just was like, we were floating the idea that I was already of the age. I was already 20. I was already in my 20s. I was,
right.
I wouldn't be able to go to Eretz Yisrael at any other point necessarily until if I went after I got married, it'd be one thing. But like as a bacher, I never went to yeshiva. I was never able to go to yeshiva in Eretz Yisrael.
Right.
So we figured out that I would do the treatment on a whatever it was, on a Thursday, whatever it was, and then I would be able to go. We basically planned that I would do the treatment. I would go to Eretz Yisrael to yeshiva for 3 months.
Yeah.
And come back for another treatment. And if I wanted to go back, I would go back. If not, whatever. I would figure it out then. But at least to get the experience of learning in Eretz Yisrael, just to be able to go and learn in Eretz Yisrael. So we actually did that. I went to. I chose to go to a yeshiva that I knew I had a friend that was already there, just to be able to have somebody familiar, not to because usually for guys that go to Eretz Yisrael, it takes them 2-3 months just to get acclimated to yeshiva.
Right.
And I only had 3 months in Eretz Yisrael.
Right.
So I went.
Pretty amazing.
What's that?
That's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
You only had 3 months. Yeah.
Yeah. So I went to Yeshiva Medrash Shmuel actually in Rechavet.
Oh wow. Yeah.
Yeah, Rabbi Moskowitz, unbelievable guy, unbelievable Rebbe. He, I became even close with him while I was there, and my friend was at that yeshiva, so I had somebody familiar that could help me out with things if I needed stuff or whatever, just to have a familiar face around, and it was great. It was a great experience, and when I came back from Eretz Yisrael, it wasn't practical to go back again. So I decided, and I was, already. It was already much. It wasn't like I was in active treatment, and it was like I was in recovery and pain and everything. I was, my hair was growing back. I was getting strength back. I was getting back to normal. So I needed to get a job basically. So I ended up through a lot of different things and people and whatever. I ended up getting in touch with somebody from a restaurant in Teaneck near Muncie, and I started out as an intern there, and I worked my way up. I was there for 8 years, and I ended as the sous chef at that restaurant, and I became a chef. That's really how I got into it.
Wow! And then you went back to camp as one of the chefs or one of the cooks.
Yeah. So at that point, I had already gone. I was in camp for a bunch of summers, and I went back. I actually went back to camp to work as a chef in the kitchen. Yeah.
Wow. And I think that was the year I met you. I mean, not met you. I knew who you were. But
I was ready. I was ready in the kitchen by then when I met you.
I think so.
That's interesting.
Maybe right before. I don't remember. But how did you get into biking and doing all that stuff and Bike for Chai?
Oh, Bike for Chai, yeah, Bike for Chai. We should talk about that. Rich this coming year will be my 10th year Bike for Chai.
Wow.
Hopefully I'll be able to join, at least for some of it. But I got into biking. A friend of mine had introduced me to hand cycles just because I knew I wouldn't be able to ride an upright bike.
Right.
And there was, I was introduced to a guy actually near Muncie, in one of the rehab hospitals near Muncie, who had a bunch of hand cycles, and he was like showing me different things that people use, different ways, different systems of how people ride bikes, being handicapped in certain ways, different ways.
Right.
And a friend of mine actually rented some hand cycles for a different organization when was it? My first ride I ever did was the 5-borough bike tour.
Oh, wow.
And I did it. I was, at that point, I had been on crutches for like almost 3.5 years.
Right.
Just, being on crutches because of all my surgeries and everything. I couldn't, first, when I still had my leg, I couldn't stand on it.
Right.
And after the amputation, obviously, I needed crutches when I wasn't wearing my prosthetic.
Right.
So I was on crutches for about 3 years. So my shoulders had built up some muscle.
Okay.
And he was like, "Yeah, just calm. You'll do whatever you can. Don't worry. You'll try it out. You'll see how you like it. Hand cycling, whatever." So I got on this bike, and I actually did like 20-something miles.
Wow.
Without any training. I was like, wow. That was, I was sore, but it was interesting. I was like, wow. I was I really got into it. And the next year I was in camp, and that was the first year that David Eggert, who was the
founder,
I guess, Bike for High, who they didn't let him bring his bike on the bus.
Right.
Yeah.
So he biked up to camp.
So he rode to camp.
Right.
And that was the first. And then the year after that, they had like 5 or 6 riders. It was a very small ride at the very beginning, very small, maybe 10 riders, whatever it was.
Yeah.
And then as the years progressed, I was there for 3 years as a staff member. By the third year, I was already like, by the second year, I was already like, yeah, I should, I'm already into hand cycling. Why don't I try to do it? Like, I was the only guy with a hand cycle, but I was like, yeah,
right.
Right. And by the third or fourth year of Bike for High, I decided to like officially, join them as a rider and actually ride. In my first year, I was able to do about 70 miles of the first day, and then every year I kind of progressed a little bit as much. I don't know if I ever did the whole entire ride, but I did. In the past bunch of years, I've done 90-95% of the rides for sure.
So when you joined and the first year when you joined Bike for High, it was a full 2-day bike tour. It was a full 2-day bike ride when you joined. How did you bike? And it took you forever. It took me a long time.
It took me a long time. It was so the first year, I think it was 2015, maybe. No, 2014. 2014?
Well, you started before you got married.
Well, I started before that, but the first year that I did like the entire first day, I think it was 2014. 2014, where I did the entire first day.
Wow.
It was 110 or 112 miles, and I had a good, amazing group of guys riding with me, and it took us 14 hours to ride.
Who were the guys that biked with you that day?
Of that year, I remember who was on. It was Nathaniel Gold, Donnie Weinraub, all these. I'm trying to remember all these guys.
Toby?
Mayor Kruder, what?
Toby Weiss?
He was there the next year. He was Mayor Kruder. It's funny. He joined Bike for High because he was on the phone while I was riding in my first year, and he joined us the next year.
Oh, wow.
He was like, I have to come. It was great. Yeah, and he was a new member of the team.
So, 2014, you're biking with Donnie Weinraub.
2015. That was 15 already. That was 15.
15.
It was 15.
14, 15, whatever it was.
I just got married.
So, before you got married, you biked with Donnie and Isano and that 14-hour bike ride.
I think I biked with Donnie before I was married. I married Donnie's sister, for those who are listening.
Well, so that's where I was getting.
I remember I biked with Donnie.
I was trying to get to that.
I may have, but I don't remember. It was
thought
a long
you
time ago.
I thought you biked with him before you got married, and that's like, because how did Donnie know you then before
No.
you?
Oh, how I met my wife? How I met his sister?
No, well, how did Donnie get to know you, and then because you told me once that he knew who you were already from Teaneck, from the
You
restaurant
knew who
in
I was
Teaneck.
from his him and Yitzi Haber are partners together in a entertainment business.
Right,
I knew Yitzi from having prosthetics and being, I was
right.
friends with Yitzi. So I knew Donnie through Yitzi a little bit. That's how I
So you didn't get
peripherally. I
to
didn't
you
really
didn't
know
get
him personally
you
so
didn't
well. No.
you didn't get to know Donnie on Bike for High. You knew him
No.
already a little bit beforehand.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
I knew him a little bit before, and in 2000, yeah, I know a little bit, like peripherally. I knew him, and then
Right. So then, when you were read to his sister, what did he tell his sister about you?
so how I met my wife.
Well,
So
I don't
I
want to
was a,
go.
I was a sous chef at the restaurant at the time,
Right.
and he was having dinner, and I saw him. He was like the last table of that night as I was leaving. And it was
Okay.
summer, so it was outside. So I was walking by him to the parking lot, and I saw him like through the corner of my eye, and he stopped me. He said, "Oh, JJ, what's going on? Whatever." We're schmoozing, and we were talking. And it's like, "Oh," and his wife asked me like, "What are you looking for? Are you dating yet?"
Right.
Whatever, back and forth. So, and that was that. And it happens to be that they were out for dinner, and his sister was actually babysitting. They came home, and his wife told now my wife
Right.
that I have to set this up, but I just met your husband. You're going to marry this guy. That's really what she said
Wow.
right away.
Wow. And what did your wife
She was
have
and
to say?
the first thing she said, by the way, he has one leg. You should know. I was like, oh, cool, all right. She of course grew up with her brother Donnie's best friend Yitzi Haber,
Right.
who had a prosthetic leg her entire life, and she grew up with somebody like that. So to her, it was actually familiar. So it wasn't like
Right.
wasn't so crazy.
It wasn't foreign for her.
Right, exactly.
Because Yitzi was in the house a lot.
Yeah, they're best friends. Yeah.
Right. Wow. So, and now you have kids, and Baruch Hashem,
Baruch Hashem, I've been
they're
married for
growing
8
up.
years now. 3 amazing kids, Baruch Hashem.
Morty is how old now?
And Morty is 6. And Shauna's 4.
Wow.
And Shmuley is going to be a year. Next month.
It's JJ. You give a lot of chizuk to everyone here, and I know, and I could personally tell you, I would not do Bike for Chai. I would not have done Bike for Chai if not for you. So I have to give you all the Hakar Satay for that, because when I had the opportunity to do it, I think you pushed me a little, and
I'm sure I did.
and
of course you should come. What do you mean?
And now we have a whole team, Baruch Hashem.
Yeah, Baruch Hashem.
And it's less than a month away, and we're all gonna do as much as we can, and we'll all just enjoy. But JJ, you really give everyone lots of chizuk, and I just want to say thank you to you and to your family, and especially your wife and kids, for all the chizuk that you give to everyone, and on a daily basis. Like we wake up every morning, right? And we say Maidani, and we thank Hashem. We thank JJ Eizik for all the good that he has given to the world, and continues to give to the world. And I just want to end off with saying thank you for allowing me to interview you, and it was a real treat. I know it was a long time in the making.
Yeah, I'm sorry it took this long, but we eventually got here.
For a couple years already.
Yeah, it's true.
But yeah, it was really, really amazing, and you inspire me, and you inspire the whole world, and we all we can say is thank you, JJ.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me on. And I want to just end off with a message to the audience after hearing my story. Your show is called The Unique Perspective, and I think for people that, for the vast array of guests that you have had on and that you, Rich Shem, will have on, everyone has their unique perspective. And for me, going through what I went through, as you just heard, it gives me a rather unique perspective on life and on the world and on Yiddishkeit and a relationship with the Eibishter. And, I can just tell you, I'll tell you one short vart just to end off this way that what my Rebbe told me, that the pasuk in Parshas Kisisa explains when Moshe Rabbeinu is talking to Hashem and he says, "I want to see your face." He says, "Show me your face." And the Eibishter says, "You can't see my face." Right?
Okay.
Says and then it says at the end, it says, you could see me from the back, you can't see my face. And the pshat that's brought down is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has a plan for the world and has a plan for each and every one of us, b'hashgacha pratis, for each person individually. And we're all interwoven, obviously, into each other's plan, but he has plan and hashgacha for each one of us individually, and we are put in situations for certain reasons.
Right.
The only thing we can do is once we go through those situations to learn from them, we look back. We look back and we see the amazing intricacies of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's plan for us. Because I can honestly tell you, I would not be who I am, and I would not be where I am today without having gone through what I went through. So everything, and I mean that in a good way.
100%.
I think having gone through all this has made me and has made my family into what we are, and being able to the privilege for me to be able to give chizuk to people in that way is an amazing thing. And I think we should all open our eyes a little more and understand that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has a big plan for us, Mitzvah Shem, and with Mitzvah Shem, with the Geula, should be here sooner than soon. Should come, as soon as possible, the Geula. But until then, we understand that we are where we're supposed to be, when we're supposed to be there, going through whatever we're going through, for a very important reason. And we shouldn't give up hope on anything, and we should understand that it's for a reason, and we have a lot to live for.
Wow. Yeah. Just one quick question. The most important person in your life, or that was in your life, that you could speak to or would speak to still for like an hour.
Now?
Now or before, during your time.
During my treatment. It's funny. I mean, obviously, my mother, who's right at my side the entire time, davening and advocating and everything else for me. But as someone, not. I mean, obviously her, but but at that time, besides for her, I think her and my father.
Right.
I think it would have to be my grandmother. My grandmother, Allah Shalom, was very special. It was very special to me, very special to everybody. Everybody called her grandma. It was everybody who ever knew her called her grandma. It wasn't, she wasn't Mrs. Eizik to anybody. She was grandma.
Right.
She was, and she passed away about 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And a little over 3 years ago. And I'll tell you an interesting story actually to end with this.
Yeah.
About grandma. When I was diagnosed with cancer, she was already older. She was already living.
Right.
She was living in my parents' house at the time. She had moved in because she couldn't do the stairs at her house anymore. My parents built her an apartment attached to our house. She was living in our house with us. Every day I was able to, Baruch Hashem, grow up with my grandmother in the house.
Right.
And and she was already older. She was in her 80s. And when I was diagnosed with cancer, my parents were afraid to tell her. They weren't sure what to do. It happens to be that her career when she was working, she was a nurse.
Oh wow.
She was a chemo nurse in the hospital in like 1960s when it was like when like the nurses fixed their own chemo. It was like back in the original days of chemo.
Right.
In the original days of cancer treatment. So she was really in the beginning of it. And but my parents, like, she was older. They were moms. They didn't know what to do. My mother decided she was going to tell her.
Okay.
My mother came out of her apartment crying, and she said, "Grandma's going to be the one that's going to get us through this."
Wow.
Grandma said whatever she said to her,
right.
And Grandma was there for us for everything. She was there for me. She was, and just to give you a little glimpse of what Emuna Pshuta means for the last generation.
Yeah.
She was, she grew, she when she was
went
married,
through she went through the war?
No, she was born in Muncie, like I had said.
Right.
She was born in Muncie. She actually went to Palestine before Eretz Yisrael. That's a whole different podcast.
Yeah, that's
a whole different conversation. But then they moved back to America after whatever she went through. Right. They moved back to America. They established themselves in Muncie, and in the very early years, at the time, women didn't cover their hair. She never covered her hair. She wasn't really, when she was already over 80 years old at the time, she said, what can I do? As I can't daven as much because she never read Hebrew very well. I can't daven, I can't do a lot of things I can't do. But what can I do for my grandson? And she was extremely makpid till the day she died. She was extremely makpid that her hair was always covered.
Wow,
that was her mitzvah.
Beautiful. That was her
mitzvah. And her nurses, when she started having nurses at the house, she was always very careful. When she woke up right away, they had to put it on and make sure it was covered all the time.
Wow.
But to be of that age and to take on something new for her, it was, that
must have been very hard.
That was the moon of the last generation.
Yeah. Wow. Anyway, thank you, JJ. I really had a great time. Thank you for coming on, joining for the last, hour plus. And we gotta have you on another time. We gotta have you on another time.
Okay. Looking forward to it.
Yeah. All right. Have a great rest of your day. Or whatever it is.